an initiative from the design groups in the graduate school, and it's a series of lectures where we're trying to look carefully and in some detail at what is adjacent to architecture, and we suspect that we have a great deal to learn from these people. We're not looking for any kind of direct instrumental relationship, but it seems that great advances and innovations are happening, and we want, if we can, to be part of that. And so, to tonight's lecture, which I'm very pleased to be the one who's introducing. I was quite intrigued when we got the initiating text of what the lecture would be about, the use of two Vitruvian words, and to use the words beauty and utility in the context of the latest information technologies seems to me to initiate a kind of tension that we hope will be very interesting. Raman's background is also very interesting, from MIT, where he did both his bachelor's and master's. Founded his own company, I think straight away, no, much later. Maybe we'll hear a little bit more about that. He's also, for those of you who find tonight's talk interesting, I think has a very innovative way of publishing on the net, has a subscriber email newsletter, which I have subscribed to and is very interesting and promptly replies. But the amount of information and the spread of information that seems to cover art and engineering, ecology and so forth that's available through his site and related sites is quite extraordinary. And if you will indulge me one kind of small personal metaphor, when I was very young I wasn't interested in studying and I went to sea. And the first systematic study that I ever did was navigation. And it seems to me that in this age, and particularly for your generation, we need new forms of navigation. And there's a beauty and elegance to the precision of mathematics in navigation, and I'm looking forward to hearing that. Thank you.
Thank you for that kind introduction. I did actually spend about 10 years as a researcher at Xerox PARC, and in some sense I did go straight into this company. So what I've been working on, I've pretty been working on continuously all my career. And it is about navigation. It is fundamentally about this boundary between humans and the world. And that boundary, maybe one of the verbs that best describes it is navigation. There's some intentionality, the human's trying to get somewhere, but the world is presenting some challenges, and any interior account of what you're doing is always shown again and again not to be actually what you did. You have to deal with the curved balls the world's throwing at you all the time, and that's what makes navigation particularly interesting. It's a boundary between humans and content, or humans and the world as it delivers stuff into their brains. And so I would say that characterizes all my work. I felt the need to connect to that introduction. Adjacent. A lot of times the accidents of how you end up giving a talk one way or another because this happened right just then changes how you look at it or something. So you got to be a little bit open and navigate each of these situations too. I'll try not to keep going meta and go across, a prepared talk of some sort, and then, see what happens here. One thing that has happened is a set of excerpts from a chapter that I was going to talk about haven't arrived. So there's some space in there that I'll figure out what I'm going to do. If you kind of dare to go after words like beauty and utility, you also have to kind of say, well, I'm probably going to screw up in American lingo. So look at it as just a design study or an exercise and see what comes out of it. There's this, whenever I try to think about something big, then I try to find something small that somehow has in it the germ of, or the tensions or something to explore that might be the grain, the seed, for making you get at the big. So this quote I've always loved: concepts without percepts are blind, percepts without concepts are empty. And in various ways, I feel like a lot of the work that I focus on is one line or the other, or an attitude I have is one line or the other. Concepts without percepts are blind, to me, is some degree what information visualization is about. It's saying that you can't really understand these complicated things without seeing them, that these eyes of ours are marvelous tools for extracting information about the world, and we haven't been leveraging them in our information system designs to the extent that we could. And so a piece of work that I'll show is about that. Percepts without concepts are empty. This is maybe art or design of a certain kind run amok, right? When the poster forgets that, part of the point of the poster is to actually get you someplace, make you want to be there and get you there physically, right? It's trying to solve some real problem. And sometimes in sort of the blazing artistry of the poster maker, you end up not actually wanting to go, so it doesn't matter if they tell you how to get there, because after looking at the poster, you say, I don't want to go. So in thinking about beauty and utility, I thought, okay, take that brilliant quote and just map these terms to these other terms, right? Do I take beauty as percepts or utility as concepts, and utility as concepts, or do I take the red, the middle connections? I struggled with that just as a little toy exercise to say, well, if I say beauty is percept, that's already telling, just making that connection makes me feel a certain way about what am I saying. Beauty is concept, some people would say that, of course. And so really, all those connections are plausible and indicate some kind of theory. On the generator of that previous sentence, you take the sentence, you substitute the beauty utility into those sentences where percept or concept are, and then you got a theory of some kind. So doing that exercise, this is how I end up with some structure like this. And it's filling it out. I'm gonna talk about each of these, and gladly I put two things of mine in a couple of the buckets, because then it's the opportunity to talk about the work. So a lot of this is just creative talk formulation or creative structure. The talk itself is some kind of design or structure, and playing around with how I think, how I create slides, how do I decide whether I'm going to sound shallow or stupid, how do I get to talk about enough of my own work. Well, you position yourself into the grid somewhere, and talk about your own work, because that's what you're supposed to do to some degree. So now looking at this structure and say, well, what does it do? Is it going to tell you deep truths of the universe? Maybe, maybe not. Is it going to allow us to play around with these different things and pull one thing out of them? I think so. So take the beauty without utility is blind proposition. Blind, empty, I felt the need to kind of unpack them a little bit. Blind is about ineffectiveness, and emptiness is about a lack of worth, a lack of fundamental worth, whether you want to call that truth or beauty. You end up back at these words. They start crossing over very quick. And so beauty without utility is not effective. Let's say it that way, because beauty without utility is blind, doesn't quite read right. And so then I go, well, if everybody takes people like Gehry or Chiluly, and I'll show you some quotes from them along with some pictures of them, then you start realizing that in order to be effective, there's a lot of craft in what they do, and you have to work a very hard time. So that's the simple point of this, that there's necessity of utility. Even if you're pursuing beauty, there's a necessity of very utilitarian things. You cannot actually reject the world as an artist and be a great artist. You have to be able to master some craft or set of skills with your hand or material in order to be that. Beauty without utility is not worthwhile. Now, who would say that. You've probably met that kind of person. It's a little bit senseless to argue with that person. And so I said, well, okay, what's a way to talk about it? And saying, well, let's just forget about beauty. Don't argue with me about beauty and how bad or how useless beauty is. Just show me what good it is. I'm not going to argue with you. Let's just look at things that are really good. Let's look at things, and with a little bit of embarrassment, I'm putting something that I do as not really good, really effective. really, working. And maybe you can get a harsh utilitarian to all of a sudden say, that's beautiful, accidentally, right? Then you got it, right? You didn't actually convince them beauty was worth anything, but you made them appreciate what beauty is about, that moment where all of a sudden you feel something. Utility without beauty, now moving down to the lower left-hand corner. Utility without beauty is not effective. That's really saying that beauty sometimes plays a utilitarian role in a design. When you choose a beautiful look, that might be because you just want a beautiful look, and it might be that sometimes you realize that's actually necessary for this to work. And it particularly happens as you start to move over from design that's about that's serving multiple purposes at once. It's doing a purpose, but it's also communicating a message. And so you move sort of from building to wall to the stuff written on the wall, right? The stuff written on the wall isn't exactly holding the building up, but it's making that whole structure and that whole situation work. Then final cell of this grid, the utility without beauty is not worthwhile. And that's maybe the antidote to the extreme utilitarian, where somebody just believes in everything being beautiful. And so to some degree, when they see an absolute harsh utilitarian, they come at that stance. And I'm going to talk about Jakob Nielsen, and not really about Jakob Nielsen. He's a usability expert. He's a self-made, he is a great mind and usability expert, and he's worked many years to be the expert of what he does. But he's created this, he's called the guru on the web about usability. How many of you ever heard of Jakob Nielsen? Can I see some hands? Okay, fine. So he's a self-appointed guru. Considered, he himself says, I'm the smartest man on the web, because somebody else said this, right? And what he means is on the web, on the topic of the web and how to make the web usable. But in fact, usable isn't all. And so it's created among sort of the design set of web designers, this just backlash of spoofs of Jakob, from his site to his picture to using Flash to make Jakob do dances, all the stuff. And just looking at some of those, you go, wow, what causes that emotion? What causes that emotion? Okay, now moving through this, I can tell that I'm going to have to kind of go fast to try to get through some of this, or to try to get at it, or go lighter some places maybe. So there's, how many of you have seen Dale Chiluly's work? Okay, not, either shy people, get less shy so I have a real signal, or it's true. So let's try that again. How many have seen Chiluly's work? Okay, so not that many, right? He builds things with glass, beautiful things with glass. Things modeled on conches to all kinds of things he sees, but his material is colored glass of various kinds. So here he's trying to build Indian baskets. I'm sure you're all reading the quote. And you see at the end of it that he's recognizing heat and gravity. Now, were the basket makers, he's inspired by Indian basket makers, did they naturally have to recognize the use of heat and gravity in sort of the same way that glass technique required? So this is where you say, well, you can't make beautiful things without being a utilitarian. You grab the torch. If you don't know how to use the torch, you might light the building on fire, but produce nothing beautiful, right? Then, to use that to make, Las Vegas, right? This place run amok, it's sort of like an octopus's garden, I guess, or coral reef or something, and that outrageous place called Las Vegas, where everything is used to excess, somehow they decided to use him to build a glass ceiling in the Bellagio. 1,000 flowers, and making sort of this utterly artificial thing just because of the vibrant diversity of it come out as almost natural, right? Natural things or wild things produce just this variety at the surface that you kind of go, well, only nature produces things like that, right? And so here's utter artifice kind of producing this chaos. And I mean, I'm not saying whether I like it or not. It's too dangerous a thing to say, I think. Well, also, I don't want you to, say here whatever I'd say on that issue. So now take Gehry. I picked on particular things because they emphasize the point of, where was Gehry learning? What was he learning with? And this is a relative. It's not a building, clearly. And this one really gets at the point that I was making about Chiluly. That certainly there's been this great long attempt to work with certain kind of materials and to have a voice in architecture, and then the luck to find a place where you could build something like this, right? This has to cling to some wicked, harsh place in Colorado, and it's a place to be like that. I'm sure the interior cannot, feel like that. But in order to make that work, you don't want this piece of building to slide down the mountain. You want the weather and the seams to work. One time I was talking with Frank Gehry, and he was talking with somebody else. It was a conversation. We're around, and at some point, I all of a sudden saw his eyes light up, and they were talking about Bilbao, and you can see that there's been plenty of talk about this. He was getting lots of credit and lots of writing and lots of stuff had been said, and he had this sort of dulled, okay, I don't know what, and all of a sudden he just kind of sat up in his skin a little bit and said, "The building doesn't leak." And so, okay, it can look like that and not leak. Right, that goes back to a utilitarianism, right? No matter that he's building things, you could dismiss this architect based on the kind of way he pushes the border of a lot of things and say, what's driving him? Beauty. But yeah, you can't produce that without lots of hands working on certain core problems behind it. The building on the right was his design made, I think, for the New York Times building. It did not win. It was a finalist. And the building on the left is, I guess, okay, now I'm gonna move on. I just wanted to show those. Say, okay, what these are people, both Chiluly and Gehry, who I don't know whether I like or dislike everything I see of theirs, but I marvel at what they produced, and then finding with them a focus for a long period of time to master those productions. Being able to stick to trying to produce things that look like that. So then the next thing is this element of work from my own work called wide widgets. They're these new user interface widgets. So if you think about a user interface, the graphical user interface, we have all these little widgets, the scroll bar, the list view, and it was supposed to be the graphical user interface, and it sort of was for a while and still is sort of. But in fact, what are we looking at most of the time? We're looking at text. So how do we turn it back into an intensely graphic thing? You build these things they call wide widgets. They're sort of things that blast open the doors and use this power of human vision. The best way to understand one of these things is to see one of these things. So, talk about the graphical user interface. There it is. I have a lot of programs. That's the thing of not knowing whether you're a computer scientist or exactly what you are. You end up wanting to install every piece of software used by every discipline. because you kind of want to use Photoshop and you want to use this and that, and you kind of go, what are these different tools like? Maybe they'll help me do a design of some different kind. Okay, so this is a canonical wide widgets. Wide widgets are actually a genre, and they're all like each other in some way. And once you've seen one, you start to see the family resemblance with the others. And so this particular widget is for looking at large hierarchies. An example of a hierarchy would be a organizational chart of some kind, the big cheese at the top, Rachel Anderson reporting to him, and on down to people reporting to her, a corporate structure or hierarchical structure of some kind. The first thing you can do is, of course, move around in the structure. So you're moving several levels at a time. Rather than opening up a text thing and having a new window flash, we're seeing a lot of space and able to get around this entire structure, swinging from branch to branch, however you'd look at it. So it's a focus plus context technique, as a lot of the good wide widgets are. There's an area where they show you more information, and a huge context where there's a little less information, but that little less is enough to tell you whether you want to go off that direction and point at places, and also it's enough to contextualize whatever you're seeing in the focus. So the first thing this thing is doing is managing the space. You're plucking on the information and manipulating the information and moving around it. So it's trying to intermediate the dialogue between you and this information structure. But it's not until we start using the visual variables that the power really starts setting in. So maybe that these colors now, you can't help but see these colors, right? Try not to see the colors. You can't. 2, 5, so this color means 2 years in the organization, this means 5 years in the organization, this means 10, this means 20. The person in this organization that you really know is working for Rachel. You're looking for this person's email or something like this. You know she works for Rachel or he. And in here, I pull this out and I see 3 purple nodes. Long timer. Let's say you know that they're an old timer. Try not to see purple. Even moving, you cannot see, not see purple, whatever. Try to read Steve. Try to read Steve. You can't do that. But user interfaces are asking you to read Steve rather than see purple. So that's this issue of designing around these skills that we all have, and using these eyes which are underutilized in these information designs. Once you've seen one visual variable work, you can just kind of plow through all of them, right? So color is good for showing you the type or the quantity, the amount of this person. Thumbnails are being used, you see here. We're good at face recognition. We're good at shape recognition. If you're a well-trained or a scholarly architect, let's say, you probably could recognize, let's just pick a number. 10,000 buildings, would that be really scholarly? Probably, right? Maybe 1,000? At what point do you start looking like a knowledgeable architect? Oh, that building reminds me of, that building reminds me of that. Is it 1,000 buildings? Is it 10? I don't know. I'd have to go, decompose an architect and see. But, so we're good at recognizing shapes. Chemists are really good at looking at molecules. Saying, that's that one. Yes. Oh, yeah, that's that one. Sure. You say so. And so we're good at using faces, shapes, large forms when we build a database of this. So these thumbnails are good for that. Thumbnails have that degree of resolution in them. Icons really don't. They're more like cartoon-style representations, maybe a little bit of information. They're all the same. If you scanned already, you've seen that they're all the same. You've figured out they're all the same. But they could be different. One could say graphic designer. One could say architect. One could say, marketing person. So you know who to talk to and who to avoid and so on. And so, or who's the right person to talk to against this problem, really. That's the fairer way to look. We can do link color. You see link thickness here. These are thick and these are thin. And that's just sort of emphasizing the center, right? And it's helping you see the center, as is that little red dot, in the top indicator here is telling you that's the center. So you can get back to the top easily. So it's serving a functional purpose there. But link color could be, also telling you some information about the link. Maybe the colors of the links could mean something about the flow of information. This guy communicates a lot to this one, or does. You probably don't have that data about people. Sometimes chemists have that data about genes or some other structure. So having a general widget that can be used in a wide range of the places, that to me is actually the excitement of computer science. You're always looking for general machines that can be used in lots of ways. To use them, you have to particularize it. And the particularization is the application of that widget to a particular domain. And so using a star tree, I'm sure it could be used across a wide range of applications. It has been. And it's always, in some ways, I'm always surprised at the next application, and I'm not surprised at all that it was applicable. And so I'm still waiting for the thing that just makes me say, no, I could not have imagined that. I can start to die now, right? This is it. And that somebody has actually used this widget as a point of departure to invent something different. And that's going to happen. That's evolution of some kind, cultural evolution of some kind, or knowledge evolution. And that's really the interesting thing. All right. Okay, one other visual variable to show is how do you tell about things far away? Let's search for Steve. You see those little red dots popping up there at the edges? It's a 1-bit visual variable that's saying Steve's out here. If you know that the Steve you want reports to Meth and has people reporting to him, then you can quickly just go to him. So it's helping you assimilate those search results very quickly. The other thing it does is, let's say, a week later you've forgotten the guy's name. What was his name? Was it Tom? What was that guy's name? I don't know how to search anymore. I've lost the precise handle. But I do remember when I searched and saw it on top of a map. It was over here somewhere. It was probably over here. Let me look around in here. Oh, here's that guy. His name's Steve. So what happens is, by searching on top of a map, you've kind of integrated this search browse thing, and they have different properties. You remember them in different ways and for different lengths of time. And by integrating them into these visual displays, you're having these rich interactions with the content that now starts to approximate exactly how memory works in the wild. I mean, when you think about finding things in an office or a place where you've worked a long time, think about all the ways you might be triggered into finding it. One cue failed today, got covered up, but you're sure that it's over there somewhere. I just remember physically reaching over there to do it. And so that's the issue in interacting in these rich, visual, live spaces, that there's a utility that comes from all this stuff happening at the glass that's a robust utility. It's exactly leveraging what we do in the wild, when we were apes or whatever, and being able to find the carcass that we killed yesterday so we can go back and eat some more. If we didn't have those skills, we wouldn't have survived. I'm going to quickly show some uses of this thing. This is a friend of mine that said, "Oh, make this more beautiful." Let's say we were doing web browsing, and she decided to use it to show the thumbnails, and this was like 6 or 7 years ago, and that's what she produced. I always like that. Now, what some customers of the company I am CTO of have produced. They've taken the widget and used it in a wide range of applications. This one is red, green, yellow with obvious semantics of which territories are producing income, in this case profit. And you can see how sliding those sliders around, as a business person, you can try to set the threshold. Hey, I've got too much red. I've got to set the target for these stores lower or higher. For some reason, this region is always red and this region is always green. So I should, ship the goods only into that region for a while until, an appetite develops for it in this region. So you can imagine the range of things that can be seen with these kind of displays. And the interesting thing is they're like graphs. They're showing you data, but they're integrating motion, navigation, and visualization, right? They're allowing you to, turn from this act of seeing something to moving through it. And it's not just a graph that sits there and you can't do anything with it. You can move around in it. And then moving around is constantly building your richer understanding of that world. Here's a website tool, Microsoft's, for for telling you like where broken links are and where the traffic is on site. So Microsoft licensed our technology to build this tool. This is a patent management tool used in certain corporations to understand what other corporations are using, how they're using their patents. You know, do these other corporations have inventors that are citing our patents? So you can think about this in sort of a competitive or in a licensing situation. Where can I go to sell my patents, or should I try to steal scientists from the other guys? So, you know, things like this. These are the kind of applications that businesses can get very excited about because they're inherently strategic, right? It's about being smart as a company. This is a very different field. Across these, notice how the feel of each of these screens is way different from another. You know, some feel technical, some feel business-oriented. Some, you know, this one feels more consumery, more aimed at a marketing person. It's a tool for understanding the effectiveness of a viral marketing campaign, an email campaign where you send out email and people will send that email to friends. And so you want to track, you know, where did it spread out? Well, every time they see the email, you know, and if you understand how some of this web technology works, there's a little ding-dong that hits the site. So you can kind of track the flow of this email from person to person. So you can say, oh, this flowed from this person to this, and then a bunch of people saw it. So this is telling me something about my marketing campaign. It works in this sector, it doesn't work here. Or here's a guy, I should like make him a spokesperson for me as like the perfect poster child because he has a big Rolodex or something and likes this stuff and he would be zealous or whatever. So seeing that kind of information is valuable in understanding, you know, the effectiveness of your moves. This now feels like an engineer's tool, you know, a Microsoft tool, I guess. Not particularly beautiful, it's an HP tool. And it's used by IT people in order to tell, you know, where on the site, you know, where in this entire infrastructure is it working or not working. You got all the stuff, you know, large corporation. You have networks, you have machines, you have disk space, and you got all these people saying, I want more disk space. And this person's saying, I want a better internet connection. How do you give the right person the right stuff? And say, well, you know, you say you want more disk space, but this server, which you also use in the past, has plenty of disk space. And meanwhile, these guys really are saturating their bandwidth. So let me, you know, use the limited corporate budget on that. Or, you know, something gets broken. You know, what do I do first? Well, that division's pipes are broken and really broken, whereas this one's just yellow now or something. Directing attention. So this picture is a portal for a manufacturing society. And understanding, so in this case, you got a directory of vendors and products and so on. Being able to navigate that portal very quickly and search for information in this association space. This is tracking the flow of people through a website. And so Vividence provides this high-end service for these high-end websites like Dell or Amazon. Lots of traffic, e-commerce sites, a lot of monkeys, you know, better known as people, hitting these sites and going through the site and getting lost against certain tasks. And so how do you decide whether somebody's able to do what they were trying to get done when they came to the site? Well, you test it. And so what they've done is they've hired a bunch of monkeys and paid them in Amazon gift certificates to go do these tests in an instrumented browser and say, okay, try to do this, customize a web blast, you know, web PC blast desktop with a 14-inch flat panel monitor, right? That's something somebody would try to do on a Dell site. And all those people, the green people succeeded, the red people didn't, right? So you get a sense of the flow. Where did they go? Where did they go? Which turn did we send half of them to hell and the other half to buying or something, right? And so that's really that you can't see if you can't see it, right? You need the data, but you also need the seeable stuff, right? That's, I think, embedded in that Kant line. Okay. Who is this guy? This is that guru guy, WWJD. This is a mouse pad. Do people catch the WWJD reference? Maybe. What would J being Jesus? What would Jesus do? right? Now you're ringing in this rich social space of, okay, here's, you can pick up on, how brilliant this thing was, right? To get at, here's this pontiff or this pontificate or whatever, right? Picking up on a certain attitude toward religion at the same time and evangelism, right? Lots of nuances in this, which I'm scared to sort of try to unpack. To me, what was interesting, I know Jakob. I knew him as a researcher before he became the smartest man on the web. And I mean, he is an authority. Without a doubt, he's an authority. I actually respect his knowledge and his authority. And yet, there's something gone amok in his extreme stance. In his advice, he is always so aggressive in talking about usability that anytime you hear the word beauty or anything like it, it's sort of like, ah! And he's positioned himself in that corner. And then he does all these things in social space that are exactly the kind of things that you do in social space if you position yourself with such extreme things. Like on his website, he has about 50 pictures of himself. Jakob thinking, Jakob standing by a Rolls Royce. It's like, who cares about Jakob, right? But he's got all these pictures and he's got these instructions on using this content, like the whole media cares, right? And you can have these pictures, beautiful pictures taken of me in beautiful places with beautiful women and beautiful cars. And you can do whatever. Well, what are designers going to do? What are young designers going to do? They're going to have fun with this. This is something to take down. It's something to react against. You take some pictures and you take some Photoshop and some Flash, and you just build this castle of things that attack Jakob, right? Because it's fun, right? And so you look at that whole structure, and it's revealing everything. The person that has no sense of beauty, that argues for utility to the end of the day, makes these social mistakes and has little clue on how it would be perceived, or is choosing to make himself more famous by purporting to have little clue on such things, right? It could be that too, right? He's constructing in social space a guru, and he has become very famous. He gets paid, $50,000 in a day or something like this at times by large corporations to come in and just say a bunch of smart things. That's smart, actually. If you can get away with that enough days, right? And then, can't stand the heat of being, lambasted in this way by a bunch of young designers, right? So you look at that whole phenomena and just keep examining it, and you see this tension between beauty and utility. Now, at the other end, you keep going, and so he's making all these social mistakes that young people that have some social skill, that are looking broadly, have big open minds, and say, well, I just like this thing. I haven't yet sorted out why I like this thing. I just like this thing. And I'm just going to keep playing with it. I'm going to drag it along with me for another year or two anyway, because I can get away with it. Nobody thinks I'm an idiot for dragging it along. And I'll just use it and play with it. And then they have a little bit more social openness at this stage, are maybe thinking in a broader interdisciplinary mode, or remaining creative, and that liking something is just liking it. And dragging it along now, they keep playing and they discover something and learn how to use it. Are they the next Frank Gehry? Are they the next Chiluly? They just liked something early. They didn't know how to use it yet, or how to make it do what they wanted it to do with it, but they just kept with it and let it kept with them. And so now that set of people that are playful, open, interested in social nuance, understanding cross-disciplinary dialogue, so on, that's what young designers seem to me like. I think, I don't know whether to say I'm young or old. I'm sort of caught in the middle, or out of geezer exactly. Both of them think I'm the other, actually. You thought I was younger in some sense, and a lot of people think I'm preaching about these things, but I'm actually not sure at all about any of them. And so that would make me a little young. And so now these young people that have Flash in their hands, they just like playing with Flash. And what can I do with Flash? What can I do with Photoshop? What can I do with this thing? What can I do with this way of smearing the image? And Jakob has given them this raw material. They build microsites, little counter sites to Jakob's sites that are a complete parody of Jakob's site. Down to the level of the writing. If you understand what it's saying, there is equal information in the parody sometime because it's the dual. And you kind of read the other one, wow, this is funny, this is really funny, because I know what Jakob is actually saying. And you kind of go, it has the same content. It's actually saying don't do these things, right? But it's doing it in a way that is also poking fun at itself. And so I was intending, I guess, to show you some of these things, but in fact what I'll do is maybe make a list of URLs and let you go visit them on the web yourself. And when you walk through them, you kind of go, wow, people are creative. They could do flash. They can make a static picture of Jakob. When you got 25 pictures of Jakobs by cars and women and things like this, right? You can do some very funny stuff. And it tells you about these tools too. So I would say go have a look. Some of it's dead stuff. A lot of this, the height of this period of trashing Jakob was 2000, maybe 2001, when designers just got so pissed off at Jakob that they had to have a go. The last element that I was going to show was I was supposed to have some chapters here, print chapters. I'm glad they didn't arrive since you wouldn't have been able to see them this anyway. It's a chapter that I did in the Richard Saul Wurman book called Understanding USA, and it's about ecology. And that was one that made me think about, well, what's the role of beauty in design sometimes? In fact, there are these periods where it's there because you just want it to look a certain way and you think it can look that way and not give up anything else or harm the communication or create some problem for you in the design. But in some cases you kind of go, actually, beauty itself is part of the design. It is serving some very particular role. So this chapter, I had a stance on the issue of ecology, right? This is a piece of print design. And the stance is that we are at the limits of the earth, essentially. But as we think about the debate about environment all the time, that there are these two kinds of things we hear. We hear this guy saying, the sky is falling, the sky is falling, the sky is falling. That's a catastrophian, right? And then you hear this person saying, but people are clever. But people are clever. We get ourselves out of a pickle every time. We're able to figure out clever things, new technologies, the free market will solve all this, right? The cornucopians. Somehow the earth is going to give you more, and our own intellectual resources are going to produce a better path, right? And so you hear these two people, debating each other, spitting at each other. And you kind of, what does an ordinary person, or what do all people do when they hear a debate like that with two people furiously, noses and heads bulging in some sort of Dickensian way, aimed at each other, spitting, and you kind of go, well, neither is right. The truth is somewhere in the middle. And then they don't do anything. Well, that's very, very dangerous in this particular case. Because in actual fact, my opinion is the truth is on the outsides. They're both right. The sky is falling. There are incontestable things happening to the environment and the world right now that should be observed. And it's also true, people are very, very clever. And we solve problems, and we're resourceful. So it's not the end of hope because the sky is falling. And so it only is a problem if you don't see something that's about to happen in some real clear way, and you're not resourceful in reacting to it. And so that's I just kind of painted out a stance. And as I went to the design, this issue, this debate, cornucopians versus catastrophians, developing countries versus non-developing countries, absolutist and relativist, in these debates. You can take this and you can say, well, which one am I? And I kept feeling across all these different kind of arguments that were in ecology and environmental issues, that I kind of, if I just took the stance that I'm going to believe both of them. and understand, from the guy that says the sky is falling, he's a natural creature that says where problems are. And the person that says, we'll solve the problem, is a natural doer that tries to solve problems, right? So you want to work with both of them and say, these guys are going to help me use my attention on what I should do, and these guys are going to be the path to solving the problem, right? And so constructing these debate blocks through this, right? Now, where did, as I started to build this thing, I had a lot of other ideas about this design. I had all these ideas before anything ever hit Glass or Photoshop or PowerPoint or anything, right? Then all of a sudden one day I'm looking at lots of photos. I'm flying across, I was looking at photos once, pictures of the Earth, and I'm like, wow, such a beautiful place, Earth is. There are very few people in any of these pictures. And you kind of go, well, this is what's at stake. The world is at stake. We're about to destroy the world. Actually, we're not about to destroy the world. We're about to destroy ourselves. And it struck me that across all these pictures, with no people in them, the world is beautiful. What's missing is the person to see that beauty, to appreciate it. If we annihilate ourselves, the minerals will circulate. And they'll construct structures on the planet that are beautiful. But so what, right? So something's at stake. It's the opportunity for us to appreciate the beauty of the Earth, right? We destroy ourselves, we can't see this again, ever. And so I said, oh, this is the emotional message. How can you do it? Well, pictures. Pictures did it. Another time I was flying across the country and I was looking straight down at the surface of the Earth, going, wow, the Earth is a giant data graphic of some kind, right? But naturally, not by me, projecting Photoshop or stuff onto it. It itself is this. So very natural pictures about what pollution looks like on a beach. You could say it's beautiful. Actually, when you see it, it looks pretty. But there's lots of things going on when you see that. And you kind of go, wow, this is our mark on the planet. So those two experiences made me realize, actually, putting all these beautiful backgrounds into the spreads of my chapter was a key move, because it was kind of communicating that there's beauty to be lost. And so the beauty of these images played the role of communicating what's at stake. So in this particular communicational exercise, the beauty or the appreciation of beauty or the human experience was at stake. That stuff, there is, from a website somewhere, some of these spreads all up in a way that you can see it. This is very, very detailed kind of stuff that really should be looked at in print. It doesn't, the design that I chose was aimed at print, and it was aimed at a certain kind of density. But I'm going to try to give you an overview of this. How did everything I just say kind of hit some kind of screen? Okay, so here's my central story in my whole chapter. Oops. Okay, so this is the intro spread that is telling you about all the different spreads in my chapter. And what I saw was that there was a cycle that humans have been in with their environment. Consumption, we consume out of our local environment. It has impacts on the Earth, which have these deeper consequences that tend to bite us back. If you overfish the pond, you run out of food. And then human action, resourcefulness comes in and you move on. And so when we were early on, we spread from Africa to Europe to wherever we did, whatever we did. We kept going somewhere with action. We navigated our ways out of problems. Now, so we went to bigger and bigger areas. From a local region, we got out of there to a region, to the world. Now we're at the very limits of the world. And that's what the catastrophians see very well. This is the catastrophians talking, saying, this is the debate block. Black and white. Is it black and white? These guys are very good. They're on alert. Exclamation. They see something important to notice. These guys are asking the proper questions about the solution. How do we resolve this in some way? And so now, as we're at the limits of the Earth, there's no place to go. So we have to have this dialogue with ourselves, and the human action is up at this level of figuring out what we're going to do. Is it Kyoto Protocol? Is it this? Is it that? How is social attention going to get us out of this pickle? And each of these different issues that I chose were the big issues of these. This is, of consumption, land. This is raw materials of various kinds. So supporting consumption on this side, consumption consequences on the left and right. And so we've got water, we need food, we mine the earth for materials, we need power. Those are the four big ingredients to build and do everything, basically. The big consequences to the earth are land degradation, deforestation, desertification, that kind of stuff, and pollutions. We're just making it an unpleasant place to live locally and globally. And the deeper consequences of some of these kind of things we do to the land and to the water and so on is biodiversity and climatic change. Those pictures that you see there were pictures that end up being the backgrounds in various ways to the spreads for each of these. So to give you an example of water, here's water. So those beautiful blue tones is making you feel water, making you feel liquid. The data graphics try to do that. There's data in rain, and there's flowing rivers over here, and the length of the river is telling you something and stuff, right? So weaving this color and the scheme through the design, and trying to make every element, it was a hard attempt at every element to actually try to be beautiful. Now, whether I succeed or not, I can claim it, and it's for others to judge. But there was an intent. There was definitely an intent all the way through to say, okay, everywhere you look, maybe there wasn't enough time to make it as beautiful, or maybe now I can go and say, oh, I hope nobody sees that little thing. It's always that way. There are those things. But you just kind of keep working at it. And that was because of this belief that throughout, whatever you're looking at, whether it was the icon, whether it was the detailing in the tabs or anything else, that if you struck somebody with a more refined element or refined rendering or beautiful surface, that you would be putting them into the state that you wanted them to. A little bit like that argument about how do you turn a harsh utilitarian. You just try to get them to the state which, the person that, is willing to, in their vocabulary, say, I like beautiful things, and not feel that somebody's going to think they're an idiot. You get them into the state that's making that first person say that, be willing to say that, just by, subjecting them to information until you go, wow. At some point they go, isn't that amazing? And they just pause and, get glassy-eyed or something, and okay, they're there. We've connected. We agree. Beauty does matter, right? You're not. If I say beauty matters right now, I lose it all, right? This person says, what do you mean beauty matters? Well, remember when you were just glassy-eyed a little bit? You don't want to rub it in once you got them, I guess. But you can see it, and they can see it too. Now, just to conclude, I have this poem that I got from an architect, Safti Moshe. And I'm going to read it to you, actually, and take it away from the screen. He who seeks truth shall find beauty. He who seeks beauty shall find vanity. He who seeks order shall find gratification. He who seeks gratification shall be disappointed. He who considers himself the servant of his fellow beings shall find the joy of self-expression. He who seeks self-expression shall fall into the pit of arrogance. Arrogance is incompatible with nature. Through nature, the nature of the universe, and the nature of man, we shall seek truth. If we seek truth, we shall find beauty. Thank you.
Okay. I'd like to ask Theo to make the first response, and then we'll throw the floor open for questions.
I guess one of the questions that I have is concerning this issue of beauty and utility. On the one hand, your presentation is very much about the things that inspire you, but one of the questions that I would have is when you're showing the widgets, which is a kind of innovation that sort of went way beyond the kind of taskbar system that you were talking about, and it's being appropriated by a lot of companies as a way to navigate through space, something that Mike was bringing up. How do you interface, or how do you go about designing these kind of systems? What are the models and precedents that you use to design a structure and a sort of way to negotiate all these data systems in a way that's functional and you're showing it? But how do you go about actually designing these systems? Something that is, I think, very in tune to the way we're approaching architecture as well, trying to find a way to negotiate how we sort of distill and bring forth certain information in systems. I think would be quite interesting to elaborate a little bit more on how this actually widget system that you're proposing and you're inventing actually, how it operates and how you feel, what serves as a model actually for these kind of ways of approach.
Yeah. Well, in some ways there's not a model, if you're going to come up with something really new. But there's sources of power, right? Or sources of inspiration or something to focus on in that process. In the case of the Star Tree, and I didn't show the table lines. If you saw it, you go, wow, it's really very related, even though it's so different. We realized that there was a source of power in the human visual system, right? We realized that people could see red, or they could see flashing of light on a knife in the night very good, very well, right? They could see this, right? So this is, how do you use that? This system is not using these systems. These user interfaces that we're using are not like our offices. They don't have this rich thing that makes them work. So in the end, the inspiration is human skill and human design, and realizing that you can design around these things that we were before we were born. And then kind of working with the material against that objective. The reason I kind of put the Star Tree in one bucket in that grid was there was no attempt at all to be beautiful. I mean, it's ironic, in one piece of print, it's like, I really wanted it, right? And I guess I would be doomed to failure according to that point, right? To seek it that way, right? But not, except that I saw it as a utilitarian thing, and I was just using it as a device. And so in the Star Tree case, there was no attempt to be beautiful at all. It was just to solve a particular problem and look for some leverage point. And then you kind of go, okay, if you can see these things, how do I structure it? So what else can I use? The information itself has structure. The world has structure. And so how do I show that essential spine? Why are we able to navigate very complex things in the world? We're good at hierarchies. We're very good at boxing things up and keeping ourselves at the right level, sort of. Saying this doesn't matter, this thing is nothing in this area is going to kill me. So I can just lump it as the useless area or something, or the non-dangerous area. Over here, stuff's going on, and I'm a little worried. Or this, maybe considering an audience is a wild, right? This part of the audience is sleeping. I better walk over here and just kind of embarrass them a little bit and see whether I can stoke them up, right? or something else, right? So we're able to abstract and chunk. That's part of the properties of our mind. And so those two things, realizing that visual things were visual spatial cognition is powerful, and realize that there's information structure in the world, and we're good at navigating with our visual cognitive structures. And okay, you start to do that, and someday you just have an idea to say, okay, let's just make a tree. Let's make it like a tree. In this case, the inspiration was an Escher piece of work. It was all of a sudden, actually, now I'm telling the story, and I'm remembering the story again. I haven't told the story for a little while. But there was an Escher print called Heaven and Hell. Bats and angels are perfectly tiled in sort of the way that Escher can do. And they're fighting right to the edges. They're getting smaller and smaller and fighting for control that are right to the edge, right? That's sort of the poetic message in this picture. And we saw this, me and my co-inventor, and we started talking about it and said, you know what? This is it. This is for trees. Because we, being grounded in math or computer science, understood that trees grow exponentially. You know, the deeper you go, you know, it becomes more and more stuff. And the only way to deal with that is by shrinking the metric, you know, making it smaller and smaller. And Escher knew that. He's not a mathematician, but he did, right? And hyperbolic geometry does this. So we saw Escher's prints of hyperbolic geometry, perfect space to plant trees. And we could build a program that would be very efficient at that. Once that set of ideas was had, and the set of ideas that, you know, the ideas that led to it, that we were looking for ways to pack structures onto the screen, and you know, throw visual stuff on it, and force this integration of navigation and visualization, rich interaction with information in this virtual world in some way. It started popping out. Then once you've had one of those, go, wow, I understand the sources of power. Just use them. You realize that this worked well enough that it's actually a whole genre. It's a pattern. It's a scheme that can be reapplied. Focus plus context, visual variables, the spotlighting things, integration of navigation and visualization. These themes, you see it in this first one, and then you go design a bunch of them. And now you've become a rapid producer. Instead of like doing, you know, trying to love every single one you have, you accidentally, you know, it found you, right? The one that worked. And you can kind of say, that tells me that that's the pattern that's going to work. Now I'm just going to generate a bunch that do it and throw away a bunch of them and just test which ones are working. And so then we come up with a bunch of wide widgets. A wide widget for tables, a wide widgets for timelines, so on. So that's how our research group at Park worked. It was an effort by a number of people. We worked together, you know, with different pieces of. There's a cognitive psychologist, there's a computer scientist, there's people that read a lot, you know, and look at Escher prints and stuff like this, right? That's what produced it. You know, it's a wide range of things. It's not clear which, you know, all of those things together mixed in a bowl produced it. You know, now which of those things is the instigator and how you do that again? You know, I think you can kind of sense themes of that, and I know how I would try to get people to be creative together. And, you know, and even in the storytelling with the two THEOs beforehand, I can see you're both out here trying to create places like that you know, about a bowl with wide enough influences, but also looking for legitimate sources of power because they're true.
Because I was also wondering what the limitations are for this kind of structure. Because I came across one of these pieces, one of the applications was a visual thesaurus.
Right.
And it seemed that the text could go on forever, like you were explaining, this sort of text, this graphical information. And I'm wondering, as someone who's created this structure, and now you're seeing these applications, multiple applications from different companies, is it endless that they can continue and create this sort of matrix of information that really has no bounds? Because there is a beginning and sort of a node points, but then it starts to branch out. And at a certain is there a time where the system breaks down in the way that the programming and how the structure has actually been implemented? I mean, the limits of this sort of hyperbolic branching, and I mean, as a designer
so
who's creating these
I
things.
think there are limits for sure. You know, you cannot use one tool for everything, for one. The issue is how far forward do we kick the ball in this effort? And then there's still more to do. There will always be more to do. And you cannot invent, whatever level, I'm now thinking this, Einstein had this quote, which I think is about perfect for this, which is, and I can't remember the quote, but I can remember some shapes for it. But it was basically, something about you can't solve the problem at the same level at which you created it, right? And the reason I just thought of that shape or that intellectual scheme was exactly in this case. You can't see where this will fail until you're at a new level of consciousness caused by these things, right? We could not see that the graphical user interface was broken until we all had it. And we were using it all day long and say, well, it just doesn't feel as good as the world. Microsoft Office is not my real office. It's nothing like it. I like my real office better. I don't get as frustrated all the time. And so once these wide widgets come flying at you, across a lot of different things, everywhere you look, if it's a large tree structure, a directory structure, we have a way of navigating a directory structure with a hydraulic tree, a better file explorer. Once you start getting used to it, then you kind of say, well, this works really well for this, but what if I've got multiple disparate spaces that are all disconnected and it's a bunch of spaghetti, and just showing it in the tree, if it's junky structure, doesn't solve the problem. It just shows me faster it's junky structure or unorganized structure. So other problems appear. And so I think there are definitely limits. And it's just a matter of making some progress. And then getting to that stage where these tools are, we have another set of problems in 20 years.
Can I ask, following up from that, do you foresee a time where such a structure could be self-adjusting?
No, I don't think so.
Where it could actually evolve in response to the data in it?
Well, I can see the use of machine learning and some degrees of assisted cleanup in this. I mean, there's intelligence in your clicks. When you're doing stuff with structures, that structure can react to the fact that it's getting human signal, and so it can adjust and say this person likes this stuff better, and it can start minimizing the information space according to this person's tasks or needs or interest or skills or whatever, slowing down or speeding up. If the guy's clicking like a machine gun, then the thing can speed up, right? It's this dialogue between the system and this person, and the system can understand certain kinds of things, very restricted things. I don't think it can understand, the thing that makes me want to say no is a true adjustment is the next invention. And I don't see the machine making the next invention. It'll be another person, 20 or 40 years after, the person that made the first invention, right? That's just how it'll go. There'll be that kind of real solution. But I could see that, we're able to do, in controlled ways, more intelligent things with systems. We're building better and better systems over time using machine learning, AI techniques, so on.
Have anyone else who would like to ask a question?
Yeah, I have one. The main thing of this machine is always it deals with interest on the one side, so somebody has to look for something and be triggered to be looking for something, and then to training. So if you don't know what a color means, you wouldn't look for it.
Right.
So how you keep the level between the two things? Like, even if I know the training, but I'm not interested in using it, I wouldn't be using it. And on the other hand, if I have interest, but I don't know the training, I couldn't use it either. And
Right.
it could level out, even if I have interest in some training. After a while, I would lose interest, and so it doesn't help anymore.
Right.
So how you keep that kind of balance between the two sides of the mechanism?
Okay, so I think part of it is you think of these different kind of situations. So a simple way to schematize it is what's the amount of the range, right? There's the world end and there's the human end, right? The human has some intentionality or some purpose, and the world has some structure in it, right? There's a certain kind of process where you know what you're trying to do. You really are trying to do a very specific thing, high intentionality, and everything the world throws at you is merely an obstacle if it's an obstacle, right? You just want to get done, you want to get past this, whatever. At the other end, you don't really know. You're just kind of going to look around and feel and so on, right? And so you're totally world-driven. So there's less intentionality. There's a vague purpose. You're browsing, right, as opposed to searching specifically. And so you can kind of say, well, is a tool better at this or that? Well, search and browse are like, for example, that, right? A search, when you get the search on Google or whatever, if you know what you're looking for, You know how to say it, and it's really there. It's a great tool, laser tool, works great. Browsing, go to a website. You can always do it, click. If you're not sure what you're doing, you're going to go, the world is the universe, authors by idiots. You kind of can waste a lot of time, and it's that kind of thing, right? How do we allow that entire scale or range of behavior with fewer designs? If you think about what we do in the world, in your office, you do browsing, you do searching, you do very crisp, intentional things, and you do sloppy work. I mean, you take your Surface and you're just doodling and noodling and coming up with stuff, and then somehow, wow, I see something, I'm going to build from here now. And that kind of change of initiative between the person and the world is mediated quite well by our physical workspaces. Why is it that our computer workspaces don't do that yet? And that's what happens, is that if you pay attention to sort of the rich source of power in the real world, or the physical world, or in the human brain, lawful properties of the universe, then you get a lot of things that work marvelously without you ever knowing why they would have worked so marvelously. You get, so I think in Star Tree as an example, if you know who you're looking for, you know that you have a lot of information, you can move a lot faster. So you know that this is a person that's been in the corporation 20 years and reports to Rachel. You can find this person a lot faster in this structure than in a file system. If you don't know, that would be a case of a tool that's only good at one point on the notch, low, now you're at low intentionality, low knowledge, but you're trying to understand organization a little bit. Well, moving around the structure gives you knowledge faster. It is beaming information accidentally at you all the time. You go down this path, 3 days later you say, well, you know what, I remember seeing a purple guy down there. That's the guy I want to go get now. So having gone down that path, you accidentally learned some purple guy down there. And you didn't try, you didn't know, but it came for free, sort of, it happened, and now you're able to move faster. So it's a tool that works, a little knowledge makes you move faster, moving faster gives you knowledge faster, and in a way that's a human way of assimilating this knowledge naturally. And so that's what that's why I think that design does work. Some of these wide widgets are not going to work, and they're playing with some edges that I don't quite yet understand yet, and may never understand. They may never work, and you throw them away and try something else or something, or somebody else finds this thing that didn't work and makes it work.
Just a short question. If we were to agree that we discard beauty and utility, we just refuse these two terms, call it utility and put it aside, and propose another intellectual tool now to advance these thoughts, what would you propose as a kind of replacement for these two notions?
So those two terms?
Yeah.
I don't know. I mean, I guess whenever somebody says a short question, it really means you want a short answer. Especially from a guy that's given a bunch of long answers. No, I'm serious. I'm not serious. I mean, I say I'm serious, laughing my head off, right? But
Right.
I'm not. I don't reject the term. You just play with them. You stretch them. You change them. Because the problem with rejecting terms and coming up with another term is that you get into some definitional warfare of some kind, right? And it's not what's interesting. What really gets interesting is saying, okay, right now, the way the two of us are leaning in this conversation with these two terms, it's making you sit this way and making you stand this way or something like that, right? But then you play around, you give another example, you try this, and you go, no, you're acting like I was a few minutes ago, and I'm looking like you were. What happened in there? And the other thing that happens in these words is that there's all these affordances in cultural land, right? I mean, that are about that, where you bring up this example. And so if you throw away terms that have lots of dialogue around them, you're losing the pathways to a lot of cultural evolution or cultural history or something, right? So I would not call this sort of B1 and A3 or something like that. This would be a classic scientific solution to this. Like, those terms are terrible. So we're just going to rename them and cut off all of the past and reinvent their formal properties. Well, you can do that anyway if you're playful with the terms that are there without cutting off the path to the past.
I guess the reason why I'm asking is that interpreting sort of some of the presentation of today, it seems to me that, for instance, one old distinction between abstract description or a direct description of phenomena in the live world is kind of breaking down. Now analogies can move both ways. Instrumental tools can move both ways, inform either domain. So this whole discussion between Newton and Goethe can probably put aside. And this is actually a good moment because it means that two terms or two notions can be restated, can become mutually beneficial. And sometimes when these terms are stated as a kind of dichotomy, one might think, okay, one might work continuously with these words, but then probably no longer as a dichotomy, maybe in another form of relationship. That was the only reason why I'm asking.
Yeah, well, that's true. Sometimes you do want to cut from the past. The use of a particular word is causing you this problem. I don't think that's the case on these. It's kind of arraying beauty and utility and saying beauty and utility. Why not? Or beauty, of utility and utility of beauty. And just kind of keep turning it. And then what happens is all that history just becomes people that fill some spot in this grid. You're designing with ideas, basically. So take the same playful stance that makes, in my mind, what design is about. Science is trying to discover lawful properties of the universe, right? It yields to certain kind of methods to do that, right? Design, if you take that design stance of the thing with ideas now, you can do the same thing. You can doodle with ideas, right? You can say, put this idea, this concept next to that concept. It leads to a lot of bad thought, too. It really does. And you see a lot of design writing. You go, what are they talking about? What are they talking about?
That's classical architectural writing. Yeah.
And so, sometimes the play runs amok and doesn't winnow itself, right, back out, and then says, okay, I've played so much that nobody can tell what I'm talking about because I've played with every single word on the page to such that it could possibly mean nothing. And so you've got to kind of winnow it back and say, okay, where I'm playing is on these words, and I'm being hard-edged on these other things, so that I can stand someplace to, suffer this resonant space that's very strange.
I have a utilitarian question. Do you know of anyone who has attempted to use the tree for construction information? Like all the information that's needed to make a building?
Yeah. I mean, there's a number of architect firms that have, bought, some form of the product in order to organize their internal content. So all the documents. Everything's an information business, right? You have all this piles of content, and being able to organize it according to some scheme of, is valuable. So yes, that's just showing that right now our information organization is so broken, on disks and file servers, that it's really easy to make a difference in a wide range of situations with something that's not even doing much yet.
Yeah, because one of the big problems in making a building is that you have 5 or 6 different disciplines, all of which have information structures of their own, which are kind of historically evolved, and it's very difficult to move information between them.
Yep.
So I'm wondering if there's some kind of centralized way, maybe using something like that could be like the construction model.
Yes. Well, for linking to that, for all the people that have been patient enough to stay this long, I can say that on the Inxight website are a couple of free download tools that allow you to play with the star tree, including an editor that would let you build your own tree, and you can import from a file system or whatever. And I have another tool that will let you navigate a your file system with a star tree. That's not on our website, but I'd send it to anybody that asks, by email or off my website. So send me your thoughts and emails and stuff, and take anything you see that's free anywhere, and go for it. www.inxight.com, IXIGHT.com, and my personal website, which has, it's interesting, some relation to the corporate website, right? I'm an officer of this company, but I'm also a person. And so, RamanaRao.com. So my full name, squashedtogether.com.
Okay, anybody else? If not, I'd like to thank our distinguished guest, and we hope we'll see you all of you at the next lecture, which I think. Okay. Very cool. Yeah. I'm very pleased the way you ended, I think.